Speed and action.
Thought about what you said to me the other day about my painting. Stayed up half the night thinking about it. Something occurred to me. I fell into a deep, peaceful sleep and haven't thought about you since.
Welcome to the Foot and Friends on Film podcast, discussing everything about cinema. Now here's your host, Nick Baylor.
10,000 years will give you such a crick in the neck.
This is my kingdom. Help me on the way here.
Welcome to the official podcast of Foot and Friends on Film.com, where we discuss everything about cinema. I'm your host, Nick Mailer. On today's episode, remembering Robin Williams, big hero of mine, fan favorite, beloved by all, gone too soon. The man, the myth, the legend. Robin Williams is the subject for today's podcast. Going to be going through some of his finest work and some great moments. Stick around, take your seats, grab your popcorn. It's time for your feature presentation. As mentioned, we're the official podcast of Foot and Friends on Film.com, where our motto is any film you haven't seen is a new experience. You guys know the routine. We're going to get the big man on the phone to talk about Robin Williams. So, without further ado, please welcome John H. Foote.
For me personally, I think the two biggest, earliest influences on me in terms of wanting to become a performer and an actor were Jim Carrey and Robin Williams. And I remember hearing the news of Robin Williams' death, and I had woken up from a nap and I had received a text from a friend. And I remember feeling really very angry about it, just because I felt it was so tragic, and the fact that he had taken his own life just struck me as really, really awful. And that finally subsided. The anger just turned into sadness when I was on my phone and I went on Twitter, and the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences posted a tweet, and it was a photo of the genie from Aladdin, and it said, "Genie, you're free." And I just immediately was in crocodile tears. I was weeping. I was sobbing. This man meant a great deal to many people, including myself. And his career was so vast and so varied. And not only was he an amazing dramatic and comedic actor, but also one of the greatest stand-up comedians of all time. We have to go back and talk about his formative years. He went to Juilliard, and so a lot of people who see him as a funny man and a clown may not recognize that he was serious about his acting, and he had legitimate training. And so going back to the beginning, where would you like to start, John?
We can start at Juilliard. I will echo your sentiments. I was stunned when I got the news that Robin had taken his own life. I was writing, go figure, and my girlfriend at the time called me and said, "Have you heard the news?" And I had not. And I threw on CNN, and there it was. And I don't know how I felt. Immensely sad and disappointed, but also heartbroken for him, because he made so many people laugh. I mean, you and I talk about Death to Smoochy all the time. And the guy that reduced us to tears in that movie was so sad inside. He had so much turmoil and hurt inside him that he saw his only way out as suicide. And for life to be that bad for anybody, I feel for them. I truly do feel for them. And I knew Robin, we weren't close buddies, but I interviewed him I think 6 times and got to know him over the years, and he was terrific. We were on a first name basis, and a wonderful, warm guy, always smiling. Although the last interview, he wasn't a barrel of laughs like he usually had been, but still, the hug was there, the kiss on the cheek was there, the smile was there. And just a wonderful, wonderful guy. His career started as an actor, as you say, at the Juilliard School for the Arts. And this is a really prestigious school. I mean, it's not willy-nilly at all. I mean, some of the finest actors ever have gone there. Val Kilmer, Christopher Reeve. Christopher Reeve was, in fact, a schoolmate of Robin Williams. And he studied classical theater. He was going to be a classically trained actor. But his mind was so far ahead of the other students that they couldn't keep up to his improvisational skills. And the only thing I can compare that to, I studied acting at Humber College, and one of my classmates was Kevin McDonald, who went on to be one of the kids in the hall. And Kevin's skills, improv skills, were off the chart. None of us could keep up. He'd just leave us in the dust. And the first time I saw Robin Williams live on stage, he was doing concert tours in Toronto, and at Second City, he'd pop in for the last half hour to do the last half hour with these guys. And I took a date there one night, hoping that he would show up, and he did. And it was absolutely electrifying. You could feel the electricity in the room when he hit the stage. And again, he was so far ahead of these other actors. And this is Don Lake, Tony Rosato, great Second City stars. And Robin just blew them away. He got work before he graduated Juilliard, and his professors never forgave him. He went to do a TV series called Mork and Mindy, which made him a superstar, made him a household name, an Emmy nominee, a Golden Globe winner. He was, all of a sudden on the front pages of People magazine, TV Guide magazine. He was hot, and he was hot because of a television show that allowed him to improvise. And you're an actor. Improvisation is probably the most difficult aspect to acting.
I absolutely love improv. I grew up watching the British show, which became an American series called Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Uh-huh.
And at TFS, we had an improv class, and it was basically just like doing that show. And I've gone to local improv workshops around Hamilton since leaving the school. It's tremendous fun, and the laughter that can be raised from that process is sort of unlike anything else. And I think what I love about improv is that everyone on stage is forced to say yes. Whatever the suggestion, whatever's thrown at you, you just have to go with it and let your guard down.
And that's probably the hardest thing for young actors to get used to doing. I taught method acting for years, and I would tell them, if they get up and say you're a blue-eyed, red-headed banana, that's what you are. You go with it.
Yeah.
And going with it is an enormous challenge.
It's also very liberating. It's very freeing to sort of, at least for me, to have certain things out of your control. And when things get thrown at you, it's exciting. And I remember actually seeing Robin Williams. He did a guest spot on Whose Line Is It Anyway? I think in the early 2000s. And just like he said at Second City, he was dancing circles around people like Colin Mockery and Ryan Stiles and Greg Proops, the standard go-to improv guys. And there's a great little game they played called Scenes from a Hat, where the host, who was Drew Carey at the time, he would simply have a hat with audience suggestions in it, and he would pull it out and just say one sentence, and then someone would come out and act it out. And one of the ones that he pulled out was, "What Robin Williams is thinking right now." And he just walked out, looked into the camera, and said, "I have a career. What the hell am I doing here?" Just one more thing before we get into this. I wanted to mention, yes, he was a schoolmate of Christopher Reeve, the quintessential Superman from the late 70s. And they were very close, from what I understand. You could even call them best friends. And Robin Williams reiterated a story once I heard where Christopher Reeve was the tall, handsome leading man, and then they looked at him and they said, "Yeah, you're the funny best friend." But my favorite story about them was that after Christopher Reeve had his accident, which rendered him paralyzed, Robin Williams entered his hospital room dressed like a doctor and said, "Mr. Reeve, we're now ready to perform your rectal exam." And Reeve laughed for the first time since the accident and realized everything was going to be okay. And I think that's something that is so important about Robin Williams is, yes, he was a troubled person inside, and people who deal with anxiety and depression and stuff often are funny people. You'll find a lot of comedians are troubled people. And I think that's because knowing what it's like to be sad, we do our darndest to try to make everybody laugh and make everybody happy. And it seemed like Robin Williams, for him, that was first and foremost all the time, was he just wanted to make people smile, and he was so good at it.
And I think comedy is an escape for people who are depressed and are troubled as well. One thing to add to your Christopher Reeve story, when Christopher Reeve was horribly injured and paralyzed from the neck down, the hospital bills were astronomical. And Christopher Reeve ran out of money. Robin Williams wrote a check for $10 million to make sure he'd never run out of money again. And anything they wanted, Robin Williams made sure they got.
Wow.
I mean, that's a friend. That's a friend.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So, anything else to add before we jump into his film?
No, let's go. Let's do his movies.
So the first movie we got to talk about was Popeye, directed by Robert Altman, where Robin Williams played Popeye the Sailor Man. You know, the ridiculous cartoon with a corncob pipe and the big swelled up forearms. And bringing this idea to a live action film, there were a bunch of hurdles and speed bumps that you could think of. But at the same time, when you think about who could play Popeye, it's one of those things where it's like, well, it would have had to have been Robin Williams. No one else could have even come close, right?
Yeah, they talked about Dustin Hoffman at one point, and Dustin Hoffman literally said to them, "Are you fucking serious?" And that was the end of that. He wasn't going to play Popeye. Robin Williams was it. He was the only guy at the time who could have played Popeye. The problem in making the movie, and the movie's got a lot of problems, starting with the score and the approach that Robert Altman gave. Robin Williams and Shelley Duvall are wonderful. I mean, they give excellent performances in this, considering the garbage script they had to work with, and the musical score and the songs. The biggest problem on this film was the amount of cocaine on the set in Malta. There are stories about Robert Evans, the head of production at Paramount, bringing in suitcases of cocaine and panicking because he might get searched at the airport. This is long before 9/11, long before drug dogs, any of that. But this guy was bringing in high-grade coke from the US for the actors, for the director, for the cast, for the crew. And to me, seeing Popeye for the first time, and I saw this, by the way, with Kevin McDonald, and he loved it. He loved every minute of it. I hated it. And I just couldn't believe that Robert Altman had screwed this movie up so entirely. But Shelley Duvall as Olive Oyl was spectacular. She captured everything that Olive Oyl was. And Robin Williams as Popeye was terrific. He's got that great signature song, "I Am What I Am." And I was bothered all the way through it that he hadn't eaten any spinach. And he hates spinach. Popeye hates spinach, we're told. And we're going, wow, what's going on? Finally, at the end, he has spinach crammed into his mouth, and his arm grows massive, 5 times the size it was. And he punches the sea monster, which looked animatronic, looked ridiculous, and Bluto. And thus was born Popeye the Sailor Man. There was talk of a sequel, but when the critics crucified the movie and it made no money, no sequel ever happened. And Robin Williams looked back on the movie as kind of a lark. You know, it was his debut. He had a good time making it. He was heavy into cocaine at the time. And the death of John Belushi, a year after the movie's release, ended that run on cocaine. He stopped and got clean. So, you know, the movie had a very cathartic effect on him for different reasons.
You know, that reminds me of something I heard Joe Walsh say. Joe Walsh, obviously legendary rock and roll guitarist for the Eagles, who also had a serious cocaine addiction, which he overcame when the Eagles reunited in the 90s. And he talked about Robin Williams and how he saw John Belushi, and Joe Walsh said, "Who were my heroes? They were Jimi Hendrix and Keith Moon and all these great magicians. Who would they have been musicians? Would they have been able to do the great work they did if it weren't for the drugs?" And then Joe stopped himself and he said, "It didn't occur to me at the time that all those people were dead."
Yeah, yeah. John Belushi's death shook all of Hollywood. Robert De Niro and Robin Williams were in the hotel room where Belushi was staying the night he died, and they watched him shoot up. And Robert De Niro says, "You just had a bad vibe. You just had a feeling something bad was going down that night." And they woke up the next day, and Belushi was gone. And Belushi was a force of nature in Hollywood. He was really something. And Williams really enjoyed working with Belushi and in the improv work they managed to do. But just like that, just plucked from the earth, he was gone.
Yeah. Williams' next film in 1982 was The World According to Garp.
I really like this movie. It's based on a book by John Irving. And John Irving's books are usually terrific. He also wrote The Cider House Rules and A Prayer for Owen Meany. And in this, Robin Williams plays T.S. Garp. And his mother is a female activist, Jenny Garp. And as the story goes, she was a nurse. She wanted a child. And after the Second World War, there was a man who had a constant erection. He was a vegetable. So she climbed on top, got what she needed from him, and thus was born T.S. Garp. T.S. is a military term for tail gunner or something, and that's what she named him. That's what he became known as. And he too becomes a writer, and a very good one. They both become writers of renown. And he spends most of his life trying to protect his mother, who is always in dangerous situations. And when she's assassinated, he's devastated. A lot of people were shocked when Robin Williams was cast. They thought he was entirely wrong for the part. I thought he was an inspired choice. I thought he was terrific. I thought he gave a good performance. Academy Award worthy? No, not at all. You could see that he still had some growing to do as an actor, but he was doing it. And he was cast opposite Glenn Close as his mother and John Lithgow as the transsexual Roberta. And he held his own. He held his own. They both got Oscar nominations, but never did Williams look out of place. And I thought it was a good performance.
Yeah, the TS in TS Garp stands for Technical Sergeant.
Technical Sergeant. There we go.
There was a film in 1983, The Survivors.
I love this movie. This was the first one where the director had the guts to just let Robin Williams go. And Walter Matthau at the beginning was, well, aren't we going to stick to the script? And the director said, just trust me, watch this guy go. And Walter Matthau said, I was in awe of what he was doing. He said it was all relevant to the script, and it stuck to the script, but took it to a different level. And Robin Williams plays a survivalist who, after being mugged and injured and beaten up, decides that he has to learn how to survive. So he goes off into the woods, joins a survivalist group, and becomes this weapon. And anytime anyone insults him, he fires right back at them. And one of the greatest insults I've ever heard came out of this movie. When Matthau says something to him, and he screams at him, "You'll suck a turd in hell for that." And there's just a great back and forth between these two comedians, very different comedians, but very good comedians. And it was one of the few times where Robin Williams was just let go in a film. And I think it should have happened more often.
Yeah, there are some great examples of that coming up later in the episode. We're going to talk about performances where they did, in fact, just let him go, and great things could happen and did. Let's talk about a movie. I believe you really like this one, Moscow on the Hudson.
I was blown away by this. Absolutely knocked on my ass. Paul Mazursky directed Moscow on the Hudson, and he'd had a pretty good run in the 70s. He directed An Unmarried Woman with Joe Kleberg, and was a fine director of actors. And for the part of Vladimir Ivanov, a Russian musician who defects in Bloomingdale's to the United States, he chose Robin Williams. And I went to see it expecting nothing really, expecting a light comedic run, and was absolutely stunned by Robin Williams' performance. He had the Russian accent down perfect. He had that sadness that Russian people had in the 80s, just at their lot in life, having to line up for bread, having to line up for toilet paper. And they see a line, they get in it, because it might be something they need. And he captured all that so beautifully. And when he gets to the United States, we know he's going to defect, because we've seen at the beginning of the movie, he's already in America. But the manner in which he does it, and the manner in which he builds his life after that, is really, really terrific. And it's also got a real sense of melancholy there. He can never see his family again, his mother, his father, his sister. his beloved grandfather, he'll never see them again. Because at that point, you couldn't go back to Russia once you'd left it. You committed a crime. And I think Robin Williams should have won the Academy Award, or at least tied F. Murray Abraham for the Academy Award for this film. I love it. And I think he's brilliant in it. And I think it was the first signs of real greatness of things to come from Robin Williams.
In 1986, the year of my birth, Williams had 3 movies that came out. The first was The Best of Times.
Yeah, this was a, an okay little time waster with Kurt Russell. And he and Robin Williams play a couple of ex-high school buddies, teammates, whatever, trying to relive their past, trying to relive a football game in which the ball got dropped. And it's okay. I mean, Kurt Russell is always an interesting actor to watch. I like the guy very much. And Williams, I'll watch him in anything, except later in his career. After 2002, things did not go well for him. But this is okay. I've seen it on video a few times. Nothing much to say about it, really. Just okay.
Okay, the next one is Club Paradise, which was directed by Harold Ramis.
I hated this movie. Hated it. Peter O'Toole is wasted in this movie. The best part of this movie is Andrea Martin, who plays a lunatic of a tourist who just arrives there and cuts loose. And it was like watching Lucille Ball be reborn on camera. She is absolutely spectacular. Williams is okay. I didn't believe the love affair he had with Twiggy, the model who became an actress, at all, nor his determination to keep this rundown junker of a club open. I just didn't buy it. It wasn't funny. It wasn't even fun.
The third film was, interestingly enough, looking at the title, Seize the Day.
Yeah, this was made for PBS television and was based on the great Saul Bellows novel, Seize the Day. And it's literally based on the novel. It was okay. It didn't get much of a theatrical release. It was released in New York for the New York Film Festival. But beyond that, it never played in Canada. You had to watch it on television on the PBS network. Williams is good. It's a solid dramatic performance, but it didn't set the world on fire. It didn't do anything for his career other than suggest that, yeah, he'll do important work when it's offered.
Really big role came for Williams in 1987 with Good Morning Vietnam.
Yeah, he got his first Oscar nomination for this one and gave a really good performance as Adrian Cronauer, the unorthodox DJ who kept the GIs in Vietnam smiling. He broke every record, every military record in the book when he went on the air and just started ranting. And director Barry Levinson told Williams, I'm going to let you go, but you've got to stay in the timeline. So Williams pored over the history of the timeline between 65 and 68. And when he ranted in character. And it was brilliant to listen to. Some of those rants at the beginning of the movie, absolutely nailing the time period and creating what Adrian Cronauer was. He gave the men hope. He gave them a smile. I mean, they're in a foreign country, losing a war. They're in heat that climbs to 110 by noon. And they're not welcome. They're not welcome there. So this guy gave them a little bit of hope. It's not a great movie. It's certainly not a great film about Vietnam. And they kind of stray from Adrian Cronauer's life. There was no love affair with a Vietnamese girl. There was no boy bomber, as there is in the film. But it still works. And Williams gave a good enough performance to get an Oscar nomination.
In 1988, he was credited as Ray D. Tuto in Terry Gilliam's The Adventures of Baron Munchausen.
It's a crazy movie. This is one of the most outlandish, budget-troubled movies ever made. And there are so many good people in it. And Robin Williams plays the moon, really, the man in the moon. And it's just his head we see for the most part. And he's wild in it. He's a wild and crazy guy, to quote Steve Martin. But he's only in it for about 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And beyond that, I have nothing to say about it other than Sarah Polley was wonderful in it. And Uma Thurman has one of the great entrances of all time in this movie. But beyond that, it was just a money pit of a movie.
All right, let's talk about Dead Poets Society.
Another great film and another great performance. My only struggle with Dead Poets Society is that Williams really gave a supporting performance. The film is about the kids, And the kids in this movie were absolutely terrific. Ethan Hawke in particular. Robin Williams plays a school teacher who comes back to an all-boys academy, a very elitist academy where young men are bred well and taught about all American values and virtues that Robin Williams, of course, thinks is absolute bullshit. He hands them a book about poetry, which is what he teaches them, and tells them to tear out the foreword because it's absolute excrement. And it's ironic that he says to them at the beginning of the film, "Seize the day," because he'd been in a film entitled "Seize the Day" just a couple of years ahead of this. And
Right.
he taught them how to think for themselves. He taught them not to be robots like he had been taught to do, and that life was a very big deal, and we only go through once. So find something you love and do it. And if you're doing something you love, you'll never work a day in your life ever. And he was nominated for a second Academy Award for Best Actor.
Now, you think it should have been a supporting?
I do, but I mean that happens a lot in the Academy, you know.
It really does,
Anthony
actually.
Anthony Hopkins in Silence of the Lambs is on screen 23 minutes, but he won Best Actor.
Yeah.
Marlon Brando was on screen 28 minutes in The Godfather, and he won Best Actor. The young lady from True Grit was on screen almost the entire film, nearly every scene, and was nominated for Supporting Actress. It sometimes doesn't make sense. Now, in some cases, that's the studio's choice as to where they campaign them, because it could make the difference between a win and just a nomination. So I get why they do it. I just don't agree with it.
Yeah, you know, I never actually thought about Haley Steinfeld in the supporting category. You're absolutely right. She's in like every frame in that movie.
She's the lead. She's completely the lead. And had she been nominated for Best Actress, I think she might have won.
All right. In 1990, the first film that came out with Williams is called Cadillac Man.
Yeah, again, just a fun movie, kind of a lark. Nothing important to say about it. Williams is very good in it. But in terms of his filmography, it's at the lighter end. It wasn't a huge success, either with critics or with audiences. But he enjoyed making it. He had a good time making it, he said. He said it was one of the most interesting and fun film sets I've ever been on.
And that same year, we got Penny Marshall's Awakenings.
It's a masterpiece, and he is so good in this movie. I'm of the mind that Robin Williams should have won the Academy Award for Best Actor for this. De Niro got the nomination. De Niro had the showier role, but watch Williams in this movie. He's a gentle, kind healer who brings a group of patients out of a coma they've been in for 30 to 40 years. And he does it because it's the right thing to do. He sacrifices his paycheck and brings them out, and then realizes the drug has horrible side effects and has to watch in horror as they slip back into their comas, maybe to be brought back at a later date. He's magnificent as Dr. Sayer, absolutely terrific, and wasn't nominated. De Niro gets nominated, the movie gets nominated, but Robin Williams and Penny Marshall are both snubbed. And I've always said Williams deserved the Oscar for this, and I stand by that to this day. He should have won the Academy Award for this movie, by far the year's best performance.
Had a busy couple of years in the early 90s. In 91, he appeared in Kenneth Branagh's Dead Again.
He was fantastic in this. He gave this movie such a jolt of energy. He plays a disgraced psychiatrist, and a guy goes to him hoping for some help. He now works as a butcher in a grocery store. And he realizes that this guy is being set up. And he's got a line of dialogue where it's just alarming to hear him speak it. And the look of venom in his eyes, because it's obviously what was done to him. Kenneth Branagh's character goes to him and says, "What should I do? This guy's coming for me." And Williams looks at him and says, "Fucking do him. Do him before he does you. Fuck him." And it hits you. My God, he's out of his mind. And he is out of his mind. It's a brilliant, I think he's in the movie 6 minutes, but an astonishing 6 minutes of cinema. And he dominates the film. You come out of this thinking only about Robin Williams.
We also got The Fisher King in 91.
Got his third Oscar nomination for this. And the only sadness about that was that his co-star, Jeff Bridges, wasn't nominated along with him. Jeff Bridges plays a kind of Howard Stern morning DJ who insults a young man on the radio one morning, and the guy takes a gun and goes and guns down a bunch of people in a restaurant. Among the people he guns down are Robin Williams' character's wife. And it sends him into a tailspin where he thinks he's a knight in medieval times. And it's a wonderful performance from Robin Williams. You can see the madness creeping in and the absolute terror he feels when this Red Knight keeps following him around. The Red Knight, obviously the assassin that blew all these people away. And Jack keeps trying to break through to him, keeps trying to bring him back to reality, and gradually chips away at it. And the two become friends, and then a great deal more, best friends, as it's Jack that delivers Perry back to the real world and even helps him find romance again. Wonderful film directed by Terry Gilliam, and a great pair of performances from Bridges and Robin Williams.
Is there a story that you have about that are revolving around this movie, or is that?
That's later. That's later.
Oh, okay, all right.
That's for Jakob the Liar.
Oh, okay, all right. I got you. We'll get to that. I know you hate Hook, but he's good in it, is he not?
He's got his moments. I like it best before he realizes he's hooked, because he'll turn around and stand with the hands on the hips in that famous Peter Pan pose, and that's interesting. That's exciting. But it's just such a noisy, stupid movie. And why does the Jolly Roger stay moored on the deck? Why are we not out at sea? And, so many things that could have happened don't happen. Why could Toodles, the old man, not have gone back to Neverland and let the kids see that even if you get old, you never have to lose your sense of wonder or childlike spirit? And Dustin Hoffman and Robin Williams are good. They really are. They're good in the movie. But, man, I sat there stunned when it was over. And I couldn't wait for it to end. I'm watching it thinking, dear God, please end. One of you kill the other. Just end it. Put me out of this. And I feel that way to this day. I think it's Steven Spielberg's worst film.
Everything changed in 1992. And I want to explain that because voice acting was a separate thing from being a physical presence in live action films. Animated films had voice actors, and these were not faces you recognized. They weren't, if you look at a movie now, any Pixar, Disney, DreamWorks, any animated thing, they're star-studded, and they're full of celebrities from live action films and actors. We can all recognize their faces. This wasn't always the case, but in 1992, when Disney made Aladdin, based on the fable of Aladdin and his magic lamp, they cast Robin Williams as the genie. Now, obviously, Robin Williams was wildly famous at that point in time, but you saw the trend shift before and after Aladdin, that following Aladdin, it was headed in one direction inevitably, where big name people would provide the voices for animated movies. Robin Williams' performance as the genie is legendary for so many reasons, aside from the point I just made. It, along with another film we're going to talk about soon, is the reason I fell in love with him as a kid. About 80% or more, from what I hear, of his dialogue was improvised. This was another example of a movie where they just let him go. He was in a sound booth. He does a ton of impressions throughout this movie. He does Jack Nicholson. He does all different kinds of accents. And he sings two amazing songs in it. And he carries the movie. He's the biggest part of the movie, and he's the most recognizable part of the movie. What was it like seeing that for the first time?
It was extraordinary. I mean, you're right. They hadn't really used movie stars as voice actors as much as they should have. George Saunders did the voice of Shere Khan in Disney's Jungle Book in 1967. And that was a big deal because that was an Academy Award winning actor doing a voice job. But it rarely happened again until Robin Williams played the genie. And it was just such an explosion of energy and genius coming out of that big blue character. And from the moment he comes out of the bottle until the very end of the film, we're watching him. We're not watching Aladdin. We're not watching the bad guy. We're not watching that idiot monkey. We're not watching anything but Robin Williams as the genie. And so extraordinary was his performance that the Academy actually considered nominating him for supporting actor for a voice performance. The Golden Globes had the guts to give him a special award, an honorary award for his voice performance in that movie. Had the Academy done that in 1992, allowed him to be nominated, that might have changed the fabric of motion capture acting completely as well. But they didn't have the courage to do it. But the only downside to Robin Williams as the genie in Aladdin was Disney, being the soul-sucking pigs they are, refused to pay him his percentage. So he sued them. And when they made Aladdin Part 2, which went straight to video, he refused to be a part of it. Homer Simpson, Dan Castellaneta, ended up doing the voice of the genie. And they relented. Disney finally paid him his money because they realized other stars were going to say no way to Disney. But it's just, it's that nastiness, that inherent nastiness that working at Disney can bring about. They're so greedy, so greedy.
Yeah, another thing about Aladdin, I used to host karaoke at a bar, and it's something I enjoy doing with my theater friends. And I've done Williams songs from this movie, Prince Ali and Friend Like Me. Particularly with Prince Ali, you notice he was a remarkable singer. There's a lot of high notes and a lot of stuff that's not easy to do in those songs. Very rapid fire, lyrical stuff going on. And that's impressive in and of itself. And you're right, he was replaced by Dan Castellaneta, Homer Simpson, for Return of Jafar and for the animated Aladdin series. Eventually, after he made peace with Disney, he returned to voice the genie in the direct-to-video Aladdin and the King of Thieves in 1996. I recently saw the live-action remake of Aladdin.
Yeah.
And I think I was very impressed with Will Smith singing Arabian Nights, which is something Williams had not done. And I think Will Smith was an okay choice, and I think he did as good a job as he could have done with a movie that didn't really need to be made. But I couldn't help but think watching it, could you imagine if Williams was still with us and he could have reprised that role and done motion capture for it, and how amazing that would have been?
It would have brought a whole new fabric to the movie. And you're right, it was absolutely unnecessary. And Will Smith did do a good job. The only other actor I could have seen casting in that film would have been Jim Carrey.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's it though. But Williams, I'm not sure he would have done it, because he was a big believer in moving forward, doing things that he hadn't done before. Maybe if the paycheck was big enough, I suspect he would have, and Disney would have thrown money at him to get him to participate. But who knows?
I think the fans would have just raged and insisted upon it if he was still around.
Yeah.
Toys also came out in 92.
That was a bomb.
Yeah.
A huge bomb. And nobody expected it to be a bust because he was reunited with Barry Levinson, who won an Oscar for directing Rain Man and had made some great films. Diner, The Natural, went on to direct Bugsy in 1991. But Toys was an absolute dud. It was not funny. It is probably one of the most uninteresting Robin Williams performances out there. There's nothing special about it. There's nothing interesting about it. It's just there. It's like a big blob on the screen and crucified by the critics.
Next film we're going to talk about is the one, along with Aladdin, that made me fall in love with Robin Williams as a kid, and that's Mrs. Doubtfire.
Well, who doesn't like Mrs. Doubtfire? It's a great performance.
Psychopaths don't like Mrs. Doubtfire. That's it.
Oh, God. He's so good in this, and yet he wasn't nominated for an Oscar as Best Actor. Now, granted, it was a loaded year. There were a lot of great performances, but I really think they could have made room for Robin Williams with a Best Actor nomination. He plays a dedicated dad, but kind of a half-assed husband. He's never grown up. He's one of the kids. And his wife, played by Sally Field, just can't take it anymore. Kicks him out and wants a divorce. And it guts him that he can't see his children every day like he used to. So he dresses up as a maid, Mrs. Doubtfire, an elderly, wonderful, matronly maid, and she looks after the kids. And eventually the oldest two kids find out, but they can't tell the youngest one because she'll blow it to mom. And of course, eventually mom finds out and is horrified, feels betrayed, does all kinds of cruel things. But at the end of it, all's well. And in fact, Daniel ends up having a hit show with Mrs. Doubtfire, and he gets to see his kids every day. So, and they a nice lesson about divorce too. That
Yes.
divorce doesn't have to be the end for the family, and if the parents handle it right, and it is up to the parents, it can still, the kids can still feel safe. And it should always be about the kids. The moment you become a father, a mother, it's about the children forevermore. And, a really nice message.
Yeah, my parents had just divorced recently, like when this movie came out, and it really
Yeah.
helped me a lot.
Mhm.
I like that it ends the way it does, that they don't get back together, but he's got that great monologue over the end of the movie as Mrs. Doubtfire talking about different types of families. I also remember this movie distinctly because hang on, I want to get the actor's name right. Robin Williams' brother is played by Harvey Fierstein, who is a gay man in a relationship with Jack, a guy played by Scott Capurro. I think I'm getting that right.
Yep.
And Harvey Firestein's, sort of over the top and flamboyant, and he's a prosthetics makeup guy, and this is who Daniel goes to get done up as Mrs. Doubtfire, and they're referred to as Uncle Frank and Aunt Jack. But I remember this being noteworthy because it was the first movie I'd ever really seen where there was a gay couple in it, and they were just in it. That was it. There was no commentary made about it. It wasn't a plot point. They were just there, and they were just people, and I think that was really, really handled well.
And I think it was because they were in the world of entertainment where homosexuality is rampant. I remember getting to Humber the first year I was at Humber College, and we had a student walk in, or a teacher walk in, and he said his name, and he said, "Just for the record, before you read it on the bathroom walls, I'm gay." And you looked around the classroom, and he was gay, and he was gay. Maybe he's gay, maybe he's gay. Half the class were gay, and it was okay. We didn't care because we were all friends. We were all there for the same reason, to grow as actors, to become actors. And if our friends were gay, so be it. And I think in Mrs. Doubtfire, that's where that comes from. You're right. It's immediate acceptance. Nobody's judging. Nobody's saying a word. They're just accepted for who they are, and they're good people.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I have a musical theater background. It's I'm like one of the few straight guys there most of the time.
Yep.
I just want to mention one other thing about Mrs. Doubtfire. The opening scene where Daniel is doing the voice of his cartoon parrot, and he's singing something from the Marriage of Figaro. He's singing something operatic, and then he starts improvising his own dialogue because he objects to the cartoon character smoking a cigarette. Two things to say about that scene. Number one, it's brilliant. And number two, that is absolutely not how voiceover work is recorded. It's completely ass backwards. All of the voice work is done before a single frame gets animated. I just wanted to put that in.
All true. All true.
All right. In 1994, Williams starred in Being Human.
Interesting little Scottish film that didn't really do much at the box office. It kind of opened and closed the same week, but I do remember it being reasonably well reviewed. I haven't seen it since the first time I saw it way back when. I never ever rented it on video. I never did get a copy of DVD when DVD started being sent to me. And so I can't really discuss it in depth because I haven't seen it for years. But I do remember thinking it was okay. Not loving it, but it was okay.
Okay. 1995, he reunited with Mrs. Doubtfire director Chris Columbus for 9 months.
This was really funny. I really liked it. He had a supporting role. And what I remember best about this movie was listening to my 4-year-old daughter laugh hysterically when the two mascots of a store start beating the shit out of each other. One is dressed up like Barney, the other is another type of dinosaur, and they pound the hell out of each other. And I remember watching Aurora laugh till she cried watching this movie. Williams is terrific in it as a psychiatrist who gives terrible advice, but he had a good time doing it. I'm absolutely positive Columbus said, okay, just go, and let him just rant. And we know what happens when he does that.
Yeah. Also that year, they made a film version of a children's book I remember reading in school called Jumanji.
Yeah, I hated Jumanji. I still hate
know you
Jumanji.
did.
I think it's one of the noisiest, most unnecessary movies that was ever made. Um, I used to have to watch it because my daughter loved it. And it was like a curse. She loved this and she loved the sound of music. And it was like some divine power was beating the shit out of me for whatever reason. I saw it with the press. I hated it then. I hate it now. I don't think it's got a single redeeming quality. The animals are all computerized and look computerized. This is very early in the CGI evolution. And I don't know what Williams saw in the screenplay. I really don't, because I can't see anything remotely interesting in this story.
Yeah, I like it, but I was a kid when I saw it. I think what's kind of interesting is that it's sort of become a recurring meme on the internet. I'm trying to think correctly here because I know it was in 2016. There were 3 bullet points made. Basically, what happened was the meme was Robin Williams as the Jungle Man with the big beard screaming out, "What year is it?" And the points that came before that were it's like Ghostbusters is in theaters, Blink-182 has the #1 album, and then something else. It's like, what year is it? This just doesn't make sense. So that's sort of its long-lasting legacy at this point.
Yeah.
But they've done semi-sequels to it with The Rock and Jack Black and stuff.
And I hate those too. I have to say, I hate those too.
Fair enough. Up next, a movie I really love, The Birdcage.
Yeah, he was great in this. Nathan Lane, a well-known Broadway actor, has a real flamboyant, showy role as Robin Williams' wife in the film. And it was really interesting to watch Williams play the straight man and still get laughs. He still does it, and he still gets laughs. Most of the laughs are in reaction to Nathan Lane's character, who is a screaming queen all the way through the movie. And Williams just seems bemused by the whole thing. He's got a wonderful monologue where he talks about why he stays with Nathan Lane. And it's just, there's just so much love between the two men. And you don't question it. You don't think, those guys are gay. Those are 2 people who love each other. It's a remake of the French film La Cage aux Folles. And one of the better remakes, one of the great remakes of all time, I would say. Nicely directed by Mike Nichols. One of the times Nichols hit it out of the park. And a solid movie, top to bottom. One of his best performances, too.
That same year, he appeared in Kenneth Branagh's hugely ambitious adaptation of Hamlet.
Yeah, great film. Great film. Branagh was the first director to ever shoot the entire text of Hamlet. Laurence Olivier didn't do it in 1948. Mel Gibson didn't do it in 1990, though his Hamlet was a damn fine one. Branagh's is the most complete and probably the best aesthetically and artistically. A big sprawling cast of everybody, and directed and starring Branagh as Hamlet. And he's a rock solid Shakespeare actor. He knows what he's doing behind the camera. He keeps it moving. He keeps it interesting. And it's like a cast of thousands popping up here. There's Robin Williams, there's Jack Lemmon, there's Charlton Heston, there's name it, and they're in the movie. And a really great film, I thought. It never really got the attention it deserved. And I really do hope it's successful on DVD.
Yeah, I watched it once and I was blown away.
Yeah.
1997, he made a movie with Billy Crystal called, directed by Ivan Reitman, called Father's Day.
My choice is the worst movie of the year. It just sucked. And two funny men who are funny on their own. And Alan made a comment on a show more recently saying Billy Crystal is underrated as an actor. He is. He was terrific in City Slickers, absolutely terrific. And that's one of my favorite comedies. But when he's miscast and given a bad script, he can't save it. He doesn't have the gifts Robin Williams does to be able to save a movie. Although Williams couldn't save Hook and didn't save this either. It's wretched. And the two of them are wretched together. It's awful. It's awful.
All right. Enough said. Deconstructing Harry.
Interesting little Woody Allen film. Robin Williams had always wanted to work with Woody Allen, and he finally got to, but he's a blur. He's literally a blur in the movie. Woody Allen shot him and then smudges him out because this director can't find focus in his life. And it was great hearing Robin Williams' voice speaking Woody Allen dialogue, but you can't see him because he is, honest to Christ, he's a blur. And it was an interesting device. Did it work for me entirely? No, but it was good to see him working with Woody Allen.
All right. That same year, we got Flubber as well.
Well, yeah, another beauty. For whatever reason, he decided to do a bunch of movies with Disney. And the first one was Flubber, which was a remake of a popular film in the 60s that starred Dean Jones. And Robin Williams is a scientist who creates this living chunk of Jell-O. You know, you don't eat it, but it's I
Got
don't
all
know.
these magical properties. And,
Yeah, there used to be a toy called Silly Putty. And to me, Flubber was just an extension of Silly Putty. You throw it, and it's like a rocket. It'll come right back at you or bounce off the walls until it settles down. Made a bunch of money at the box office, so obviously parents took their kids to see it. I took my child to see it, and she loved it. And it was critic-proof. That was the audience. The 5-6-year-old mind was the audience. Didn't matter what I thought. Didn't matter what critics thought. Kids loved it.
we're now going to talk about one of my favorite Robin Williams performances and the one that finally got him his Oscar. That's the Sean Maguire in Good Will Hunting.
Yeah, he's brilliant in this. He's the reason this movie got made. Miramax had bought the script from Ben Affleck and Matt Damon, and whether people believe it or not, it was doctored. But they couldn't get anyone of interest attached to the movie, and Matt Damon and Ben Affleck had casting power. Harvey Weinstein gave them director choice and casting power. And a lot of directors wanted it for Leonardo DiCaprio, but Damon and Affleck stayed true. No, we're going to play the parts, and we choose the director. And when Robin Williams finally stepped in and had an interest in Sean Maguire, boom, it was greenlit. Just like that, overnight. It went from in development to we're shooting in 2 weeks. And nicely directed by Gus Van Sant. You can see where they drew their references from. There's a lot of ordinary people in this movie, especially in the scenes with the psychiatrist and Matt Damon. And Matt Damon and Ben Affleck are terrific in the movie, but the movie belongs to Robin Williams. He's just got so many great scenes. That scene on the park bench where he's discussing Matt Damon's intellect and talks to him about everything he misses because he's just reading it out of a book. He's never been there. He's never experienced it. He's never lost. He's never loved. That to me is the scene that won him his Academy Award. And the great breakdown with Matt Damon. It wasn't your fault. It's not your fault. It wasn't your fault. 7 Academy Award nominations, and Williams finally wins his Oscar for supporting actor. I'm a big believer that Burt Reynolds should have won it that year for Boogie Nights, and Williams should have got his years earlier in Awakenings. But I cheered when Williams won. I cheered too. I thought, yeah, good, finally.
He gave a really nice acceptance speech too.
Yeah, I mean, the guy's literate. He's smart. He's fast on his feet. I think he asked Affleck and Damon for their identification, didn't he?
Yeah. He made a joke about it. Something like that was definitely in there.
Yeah.
I remember that park bench scene explicitly because my favorite line in that is when he's lecturing him. He's like, if I asked you about art, you'd probably talk about Michelangelo, him and the Pope, etc. but I bet you don't know what it smells like inside the Sistine Chapel.
Yeah.
And I remember just before I came to film school, I had gone to Europe and done some backpacking. And the first thing I did when I stood inside the Sistine Chapel was I took a big whiff, remembering that line. And I was like, okay, now I know what it smells like in here.
It's interesting when young people go to Europe and do their European experience. I remember my daughter calling me at 2 a.m, and you get a call from Europe at 2 a.m, a collect call. You immediately think something's wrong. And she was in Auschwitz. And she says, Dad, you're right. You can feel the ghosts. And I thought, wow, this kid's learning more on this trip than any classroom could ever teach her. And that's what Sean is saying to her, to Will, live your life, experience it.
Yeah, and it's great. Like every major city in Europe, there are free 4-hour walking tours where you just go around and like you tip the guys and they earn it. Another thing I did that was like, I guess I'm a bit obsessed with movies. I stood in the Colosseum in Rome and I looked around and I was by myself and I just screamed at the top of my lungs, "Are you not entertained?"
And they probably heard you at the top row.
Yeah, they heard me right across the whole thing. And anyway, so yeah, I love that scene. I love that movie. It was the first movie I watched, Good Will Hunting, after Williams died. And that was, I finished it, and that's when I saw that tweet about the genie, and I just lost it. In 1998, he appeared in a film. I had a lot of opinions on this one, What Dreams May Come.
I love it. I was actually quoted in the ad campaign for this. I think it's an exceptional movie. For many reasons. Is it a work of art? No, but I think Vincent Ward did something really bold, really daring. Nobody knows that there's an afterlife. The only way you find out is to die. I happen to believe that we've gone through many times and we will go through again. In this film, your afterlife is connected to your life. And Robin Williams plays a father, a doctor, who loses his 2 children years before and then dies. And it leaves his wife in a suicidal state. And anyone that commits suicide cannot come into heaven, whatever you want to call it, to have another shot at life. So he decides he's going to go rescue her. And the portrait of the afterlife is really cool, really interesting, especially hell. It's a remarkable, remarkable vision and quite a visionary film. And I thought Williams' performance was very good. Annabella Sciorra is equally brilliant as his wife, just tormented by the death of her children and now her husband. And I'm a big fan. I really like the film.
It's a fascinating visual experience for sure.
Yeah, it is. It is.
I know a lot of people love this movie, and I know there's tons of problems with it, so I'll just dive right in. Patch Adams.
Hate it, hate it, hate it.
Yeah.
I think with this movie, the little boy that's dying of cancer, the little bald boy?
Yes.
I'll bet they searched the earth to find the most adorable child they could find and cast him as a child dying of cancer. And I just thought, this is so fucking manipulative, And yeah, there was a guy named Patch Adams. Yeah, there was a doctor who dressed as a clown. But his life was nothing like this. And his wife was horrified when she saw the movie. She said, that wasn't him. That wasn't him at all. That was Robin Williams manipulating the audience. And that's exactly what it was. I saw this at TIFF at a gala. And this was one of the times I had to interview Robin Williams. And I didn't have much to say to him. Boy, we talked about What Dreams May Come. We talked about what he was doing next. We talked about Moscow on the Hudson. And he said to me at the end of the interview, wow, we didn't really talk about Patch Adams. And he said, I guess that's the point, though. So he knew what I thought of it. And
Right.
I think it's an awful film. I really do.
I have a huge beef with this film, and it's just me being nitpicky, but it really, really bothers me. When the character, Patch Adams, is talking to this other guy, whatever, and he is upset because the Monica Potter character has been killed. and he's having this big rant, and he's like, "You know, human beings are the only animals that kill other members of their own species." And I was like 11 when I saw this, and I just thought to myself, I was like, "That's not true at all.
Not true. It's not true.
Like, it's not even close to true."
No.
Anyway, let's see where we're at here. Okay, Jakob the Liar.
This was a remake of a Polish movie about a man who spreads a lie that he has a radio behind the walls of the ghetto in Warsaw, and that he can listen to radio broadcasts, and he knows that the tide of the war is turning. And Williams wanted to make the movie, so he did. His wife produced it, and it's not a bad movie. It doesn't improve on the original. The original was very good, and my problem with it was that it was very similar to the Roberto Benigni film Life is Beautiful, which won Benigni an Academy Award the year before. And the story you alluded to earlier, I was interviewing Robin for this movie, and we'd met a few times, I think 4 times by this point. So I come in the room, hey, John, how you doing? Robin, how are you? And we sat down, I set up my tape recorder, and, asked about my family. I asked about his, always good. And my first question to him was, are you concerned with the comparisons that are going to come between this film and Benigni's film, Life is Beautiful? And he stood up, pushed the chair away, and said, "Fuck you," and walked out of the room. And I mean, he stormed out of the room. He was in a rage. And his publicist came into the room and said, "John, what happened?" And I told her, and she said, "Oh boy, did you ask the wrong question?" And I said, "Is he coming back?" And she said, No, he left the floor. I'm thinking, holy shit, my career is over. So I'd pack up my briefcase, I'd put everything back and hang my head and walk out the door. I open the door to the suite, and there's William standing in the hallway with a big grin on his face, and he screams, "Gotcha, motherfucker!" And I just about collapsed, because I'm thinking my career is dead. This is over. Robin Williams walked out of an interview on me, and it was a joke. He said, "Come on back in, we'll talk."
How did the rest of the interview go?
Good. He answered every question, including that one. Yeah, of course he was worried about the comparisons, but he thought, rightly so, Jakob the Liar was a better story, and I quite agree with him. Life is Beautiful, to me, is a horribly irresponsible movie because it trivializes the Holocaust. It trivializes Auschwitz and the 6 million Jews that died there. And Williams' film does not do that at all. He dies in the movie. He gets shot. And how often have we seen Robin Williams die in a movie? It doesn't happen very often. And it was alarming. I mean, the audience gasped when he was shot. So, it's got a great deal of power. It's a shame it didn't do better.
This next film is one I actually really enjoy, and I'm not sure what your thoughts are on it, and that's Bicentennial Man.
You know what? The first time I saw Bicentennial Man, I didn't think much of it, but I spent the whole week thinking about it. And I went back and watched it and got it. Really liked it.
Yeah.
I love his whole evolution from this robot to almost a human being. And the fact that at the end of it, he's held in such high regard by the other artificial people. It's got a beautiful story arc, and he's terrific in it. So no, I'm a fan.
I think it's it's a contemplative movie. It is one that leaves you thinking about it after the credits have rolled.
It does. And his performance is first rate. Really a great piece of acting.
Yeah, right on. Okay, cool. All right, we got to talk about this next one. I know it's only a cameo, but it's a movie we both love, and that's AI, Artificial Intelligence.
Yeah, and I do love this movie. I think in 50 years, this will be regarded as one of Steven Spielberg's very best films. Williams has a small part. He voices more than anything else, but it's terrific.
Dr. No, K-N-O-W, I believe, is the name of the character.
Yep.
Yeah,
he's like a walking, talking Wikipedia. And
he's almost like an operating system, so like Siri, but you go and yes, like Wikipedia, it's just you ask questions and he's got encyclopedic knowledge of everything.
Yeah,
and he does a bit of this Swiss German accent. I think he was channeling Einstein.
I think he had a lot of fun making the movie. He and Spielberg are good friends. And, you know, it only made sense that eventually they would make another movie after the mess that was Hook. And he's terrific in it. Meryl Streep has a voiceover in it as well. And sadly, really underrated at the time. You know, a lot of critics loved it, except me. A lot of critics didn't. And they're wrong. They're dead wrong. I think it's a masterpiece. And we'll be talking about it in 50 years.
Yeah, I'm completely on the same page with you. I love AI, and it's, again, we talked about it in our Spielberg episode. It's Spielberg doing Stanley Kubrick in a way.
Yep, in a way, staying true to himself, but paying homage to Kubrick with that great ending. A Kubrick ending would have been the kid at the bottom of the sea looking at the blue fairy.
Yeah,
You know, perverse and just a little bit cruel. That's a Kubrick ending. But Kubrick wrote a script to this thing. So Kubrick wrote that add-on where replicants find David at the bottom of the sea in ice. You know, he wrote that. So he was going to end it with a happy ending where the boy gets to spend, 24 hours with his mother.
let's talk about 1 Hour Photo.
Great performance. I was stunned when he wasn't nominated for Best Actor for his performance as Cy. Cy is a lonely, just a lonely single man who works at the photo counter in a store that resembles Walmart, and he's fixated on one particular family and one particular child, and he takes copies of their photos and makes a collage in this home. And when we finally see the depth of his obsession, it's not funny anymore. It's scary. It's really scary. These are the kind of guys that we warn our children about. And Williams plays him very boldly, very, very insidious. There's just something underlying with Cy that is evil. And it's never on the surface. It's always just suggested and played lightly. And I think it's a great film. I thought Williams deserved to be a nominee for Best Actor for it.
It's a very unsettling performance.
It is. It creeps you out. It absolutely creeps you out.
All right, folks, it's time for me and John to get real here, because it's a very important film we're going to talk about here. And it's a movie that many people, for reasons I will never understand, hate and think is terrible. Death to Smoochy.
Well, the reason they don't understand it and think it's terrible is because they're idiots. And
yes.
I count many, many, many film critics on that list who simply missed the boat. This is a black comedy. It is also a satire. It is one of the most vicious, vile black comedies I've ever seen. And it's one of the few films to reduce me to tears of laughter constantly through the film. Robin Williams is a beloved daytime children's entertainer who is busted for wrongdoing and ruined. And he introduces himself to people who know him a little as Rainbow fucking Randolph. And he knows he's the biggest star on TV. He's bigger than Barney, and he knows it. And when the network gets rid of him, they replace him with Smoochy, who is played beautifully by Edward Norton as a squeaky, clean, ultra-conservative, tree-hugging maniac. And Williams spends his time trying to ruin Smoochy, trying to bring him down. And I'm sure, as you mentioned before we started this tonight, I'm sure Danny DeVito said, okay, Robin, go, and just turned him loose, because some of the things that come out of his mouth are pure vintage Robin Williams. Yeah. And I saw it at a press screening. A lot of it was shot in Toronto, and I saw it at the press screening, and a lot of people were pointing out the various scenes in Toronto, and I'm sitting there thinking, how the hell can you not be watching these two actors? Because they are magnificent. I think it's one of the great comedies of all time. I think it's one of Williams' best performances. I think it's one of Norton's best performances. And to anyone that doesn't like it, give your head a shake. You're dead wrong. Wake up.
Yes, all the yes. A guy I roomed with during film school, he had done some extra work as an actor as a kid, and he said, one movie I'm ashamed to admit that I was in is Death to Smoochy. And I'm like, what? I love that movie. This is one of Robin Williams' most insane, bug nutty, fucking crazy, balls to the wall performances where he clearly was just told to go.
Yeah.
And
I
you're
think
right.
both of them were. I think Norton was told just go too.
Yeah, Norton plays Sheldon Mopes, this totally, like you said, squeaky clean, naive, wannabe Barney the dinosaur type dude. And a couple of moments from this movie I just have to talk about. And one of them I mentioned, I did an article, it was 10 tidbits about movie accents. And there's a scene where Robin Williams' character is wearing a disguise, and he ropes Norton's character into hopping in the back of his limo to go to what he thinks is a charitable event that ends up being a Nazi rally. But what he does was, when he calls him on the phone, he is pretending to be this guy from this children's organization, and he's doing a Scottish accent. And then he picks him up in the car, and he rapid fire jumps back and forth, Williams, between a Scottish accent and an Australian accent with no rhyme or reason, just to show you how off the wall, bug nutty crazy he is. And Norton, being so naive, he doesn't recognize that, or the fact that the last name of Williams' character's character keeps changing. But it's just amazing to witness, because you kind of don't believe it at first. He's like, there's one good potato chips back there if you're hungry. He's like, oh, that stuff can really mess with your chew. Well, I've never eaten Korean food, but thank you for the information. And he's just all over the map. And I think one of the last thing I'm going to say about this movie, the funniest line of dialogue I have ever heard in a movie, probably in my entire life, when Rainbow Randolph is getting dragged from a courthouse into a car and he's being bombarded by the press. And I really want to believe that Williams just made this up off the top of his head. A reporter comes up to him and says, Rainbow Randolph, how does it feel to be voted the most hated man in America? And without skipping a beat, he says, in a country full of Neanderthals, I wear it as a fucking badge of honor.
He's got that lovely scene where he's dancing in joy that Mopes has been ruined.
Yeah.
He's got a flower in his teeth, and he's doing this lovely, joyous, gleeful ballet dance down the street, and then right into a wall.
Just smacks into a brick wall, yeah.
And we don't get to see Robin Williams do a lot of physical comedy in his career, but it's perfect. It's just perfect.
Yeah. So anyone out there who might have seen it years ago, seriously, give it another watch. If you've never watched it, Death to Smoochie, one of the greatest, most dark and twisted, knee-slapping, hilarious movies I've ever seen. And Williams is absolutely great at it.
And I think that's important, is that it is dark. It is dark subject matter. It's about a guy who has everything taken from him. And he's a shit. He's a perfect shit of a human being. And yet you can't take your eyes off him, and we're kind of rooting for him. I was.
You're happy at the end when they get a happy ending together.
Yeah.
That same year, a movie we've talked about, we talked about on our Al Pacino podcast. This is probably Christopher Nolan's least known film, a movie called Insomnia.
Yeah, this is a remake of a Swedish film. And Nolan had just had Memento come out, and to great success. And he was invited to direct this with Al Pacino, Hilary Swank, and Robin Williams. And beautifully acted by all three. Even Pacino manages to tone it down. I don't know what happened. Maybe Nolan told him to tone it down. Robin Williams plays a famous writer who is also a serial killer. And Pacino figures this out, and they begin to track him. But Williams's character is brilliant and just always seems to be one step ahead of the action. And he knows everything about Pacino's character, everything about Swank's character, because he researches. He's a writer. He's used to researching. And 2002 should have been a year where Robin Williams was nominated for Best Actor for 1 Hour Photo and Best Supporting Actor for Insomnia, because he is terrific. He's chilling. He's absolutely chilling. And for a comedian like Robin Williams to turn and do a part like this really demonstrates remarkable range. And he always had that. It was always there. He just didn't get a chance to showcase it all that often. And to me, that's the one big crime about his career.
something that he had expressed a ton of interest in and never got to do it, but throughout his career, something I wish I had gotten the chance to see is like I really wanted to see Robin Williams play a Batman villain.
Well, he was up for the Riddler, and I don't know
Yeah.
what happened, but it never ever came to pass. He was going to be the Riddler for Joe Schumacher, which probably a good thing he didn't. But Carrey did a good job, I think. I think Jim Carrey's the best part of that movie. But
He is, for sure.
yeah, I think Robin Williams would have made a great villain.
He's terrifying in Insomnia.
He is, and 1 Hour Photo back to back.
Yeah, absolutely. As you mentioned, his career following 2002 is, to be honest, filled with a lot of stinkers. But there's some films that probably merit mentioning. What do you think? What should we talk about?
Well, I think Man of the Year was very good, where he plays an average Joe who makes a run at the presidency. Directed by Barry Levinson, again, shot in Toronto, shot in the CBC building. And Williams is very good in the film. One of the better films he made after 2002. He did a nice bit of voice work for George Miller in Happy Feet, which I loathe, but he is terrific. Gave a good performance in a movie called August Rush as Maxwell Wizard Wallace. And beyond that, he made some horrible movies. Old Dogs was my choice as the worst film of the year in 2009. Just a horrible, horrible movie. He had an opportunity to play a decent part as Dwight D. Eisenhower in The Butler, but never really did. It almost came across as a Waxworks type of movie where he just didn't get the chance to really showcase any talent. And he played Teddy Roosevelt in the Night at the Museum movies, forever frozen on a horse in the lobby of the Museum of Modern History in New York City. He just seemed to fade after 2002. He had a great year in 2002. 1 Hour Photo, Insomnia, Death to Smoochie, some of us. And then all these stinkers, The Final Cut, House of D, Robots, The Aristocrats, The Night Listener, RV. RV is brutal, and yet people actually went to see it. It was a reasonably successful movie. So yeah, the latter part of his career was not stellar.
I liked him in a movie, in World's Greatest Dad, directed by Bobcat Goldthwait. I actually liked him in that.
And Bobcat Goldthwait had been a friend of Williams for a long, long time. Sadly, he was best known as one of the hoods in those ridiculous Police Academy movies. And yeah, he ended up directing that film and got some decent notices. The Angriest Man in Brooklyn also got some decent comments, directed by Philip Alden Robinson, who had directed Field of Dreams years earlier. But nothing great. He did some TV towards the end of his life. He was on a show called The Crazy Ones and did quite well with that, 22 episodes of that. He was on an episode of Louie, an episode of Wilfred, did a voice of SpongeBob SquarePants, playing himself. Law and Order, Special Victims Unit, he played Merritt Rook in an episode called Authority. So he was working. He was always, always working. But he never, ever achieved the level of greatness he did in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. 2002 being the last great year of Robin Williams.
Yeah, in August Rush, I think that movie's loosely inspired by Oliver Twist. And
Yes, it is.
And he's the Fagin character, right?
Yeah. Freddie Highmore is in it. He kind of exploded out of Finding Neverland and ended up on television as Norman Bates in Bates Motel, and then now is on a show called The Good Doctor, where he plays an autistic doctor being a genius. Wonderful actor.
Yeah, he really is. In that movie, August, I was recording an album of cover songs with a buddy of mine, my buddy Rob, who plays the drums for our theme music. And for one song, I had sort of sampled a bunch of audio clips of different musicians talking about music. And I had Bruce Springsteen and Paul McCartney and Don Henley. And at the end of that little section of the clips, I used some audio from August Rush of Robin Williams, where he says, "Do you know what music is? Harmonic connection between all living beings." And he was a great singer, a song and dance man, a man of many talents, and very, very sorely missed. Tragic end to I guess what was a tragic life. But his work has stood the test of time, and it'll always be here for us to enjoy. Any final thoughts on the man, the myth, the legend, Robin Williams?
Well, the great thing about film is immortal. Film is forever. So, Robin Williams' work, his best work, is always there for us to watch. And I've gone back and watched Moscow on the Hudson since he passed, and The Fisher King, and all of his great work. And it endures, it really does endure. There was a wonderful book written about him by a New York Times writer, Dave Itzkoff, simply called Robin. And it's probably one of the greatest biographies I've ever read. No judgment. It just tells the facts right up to the very end when he hung himself. And anyone who wants to learn more about Williams, first and foremost, watch his films, because that really is his life story. But certainly give this book a read because it's very good.
And as I mentioned, a very accomplished, legendary stand-up comedian, and a lot of his specials are still available to watch, and that's a great insight into his manic talent.
I think the single greatest line I ever heard from a stand-up comedian was Robin Williams describing the realization that you're an alcoholic. You wake up, you stand up, and you realize somebody shit in my pants. And perfect. My reaction the first time I heard it was exactly what yours just was.
Yeah.
A wonderful stand-up guy.
Yeah. It's appropriate that we end on a laugh. John, thanks again.
Thank you.
There you have it, folks. Episode number 25, Remembering Robin Williams. Thanks to all our listeners for tuning in. Check us out on all the social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, especially YouTube. Hit that subscribe button for this, all past, present, and future episodes of our podcast. Got some cool episodes coming up. Alan's going to be doing an extensive spotlight on Lucille Ball. Alan, John, and myself talk about the 1980s. That plus a whole lot more. Thanks, guys. Till next time. You know the deal. We'll see you at the movies.